everyone, Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make more textured, organic sounding drums in the style of Jon Hopkins and Fortet. As usual, you can get the project file and samples from this video in the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, make sure to check there because they will be available on there. And yeah, let's dive in. So we're at 120 BPM, pretty standard kind of like housey feel, but because it's a little bit slower than usual house music will be, usually between like 124 or 130. I said usual a lot there. Anyway, at 120, we just have a little bit more of like an organic kind of like chilled out feel. So the first layer we have here is this kick, which sounds like this. And so this is just a nice kind of punchy kick, and then it's playing quarter notes. Again, we're going for like a housey feel here. And then this is going into a saturator, which has a bit of drive, and then I turn the bass frequency up a bit. Here's without it. And then with. You can hear it just adds like this nice sort of grit to the sound. It adds a bit of texture, so yeah. And then the next thing we have here is this hi-hat, which sounds like this. So this is just playing on the upbeat so you can hear. And all it is this hi-hat, and it's going into a reverb, which is set to be pretty small. So one thing I noticed in a lot of Jon Hopkins and Fortet's music, and just a lot of stuff in this style in general, is that a lot of their hi-hats and percussion tend to have this sort of like roomy feel to them. Like, they tend to just sort of have that little bit of resonance or a little bit of like, I guess, decay or whatever you want to call it that you get when you put like a very small reverb on there. So that's what I was going for with this. I just put a little bit of decay time and not a whole lot of dry wet. Again, this is just adding a little bit of roominess to the sound. So the next thing we have here is the snare, which sounds like this. And so all this is just a nice snare. There's actually no processing on it. This does give me a bit of a chance to talk about something that I wanted to talk about, which is sample selection. So if you listen to this sample, like without any processing, you can hear it fits into this mix. It has the vibe we're going for. It sounds kind of organic, it sounds like maybe some foley, I don't know how to say it, but some kind of like foley percussion or, something like that. Like, it already has the sound. And this is something that I wanted to touch on because I think too often people sort of feel like it's more about the processing than the sounds, but it's not. It's really, especially with this style, just about the sounds that you put into it, if that makes any sense. And then like, knowing how to work with those. And more of the stuff that I'm going to show you in a second will illustrate this in a more, I guess, detailed way. But yeah, this snare is a good example of this. Like, it's just a nice snare sample that fits into this mix. It doesn't need any effects because it's just already got the vibe that we want it to have. So then the next thing I will show you is the percussion, which starts with this layer of this little, like, I called it a dropping percussion. I'll play it for you. Here it is in the beat with like the kick and the hi-hat. So yeah, the reason why I call this dropping percussion is I believe, I'll show you the original samples, I believe that these were like some recordings of me dropping something or something. I have like a large library of sounds that I've just recorded, so I just kind of was playing around with some of those. But yeah, so I just put these into here, and then what I did was I just kind of played around with them rhythmically. So this is the key. You just need to find like cool sounds like this, like just interesting percussion, and then just know how to put it into the beats. Like I was saying before, it's like if you know what sounds to put in, then you just sort of have to know how to sequence them and how to give them a cool feel. So that was what I did with that. And then as far as like processing on that goes, I have a little bit of saturation, actually kind of quite a bit of saturation in the drive set there, and then I played around with the bass frequency and the depth on the analog clip there, as you can see. And then I have that going into this erosion, which is just set pretty much like in the middle here, I guess. I'll show you. Here's without it, and then here's with it. So it just adds that extra little bit of grit after the saturator. So then the next layer of percussion I have here is this open hi-hat, which sounds like this. And this just comes in on the upbeat at the start of every bar. Like that. All it is an open hi-hat sample. And then what I did was I pitched it down -3, so it would have that kind of like dirtier, more low-tuned kind of sound, I guess. And yeah, and then the last one we have here is just this little click sound. I'll play it for you real quick. This is something that you don't really hear so much. Like, it's kind of in the background, but it does add to the groove. It's just a really subtle little kind of percussive sound. But you can hear it there. Yeah, so then the next thing I have here are these 2 layers of vinyl percussion. And so what these are I took these little snippets from some old drum breaks I had. I'll kind of show you how to do this in a moment. And what I did was I pitched them up and then made them into percussion here. So here is the first one. I'll solo it in the beat. Here's the sample that I started with for that. So I had it was someone clapping from some old record or something. And basically what I did was I grabbed that. I'll sort of redo it here. I grabbed it and just brought it in there. And then I believe all I did was I pitched it up. If we pitch this up +5, you'll see that it kind of speeds up. So here is the original sample. And then here is with it being pitched up. Oh, excuse me. Here's with it being pitched up. Okay, there we go. So you can see pitching it up just speeds it up, and then it's kind of playing 16th notes. You can see if I put on the 16th note grid here, I just sort of, tried to make it fit into there, but you don't want it to be perfect. You can see this is off a little bit. That's just kind of how it is when you're working with the stuff, but that's what gives it the more organic kind of cool feel. So that was what I did there. And then I did a very similar thing with the second one as well. This little vinyl snippet. Here's the second one. So this one is like a hi-hat. Here was the one that I used for that. So yeah, and then I just pitched it up +4. And then on both of these, I also cut out the low end because you can hear there's quite a bit of low end in them. So if you wanted to do something similar to this on your own, what I would do is if you go, I have a few on here that I can play. But if you go through some old drum break samples, you can see that there are a lot of moments where there are open hi-hats and open percussion. I'll try to show you one here. Okay, that one. That little hit, the stuff like that you can take. If we just go into here, we will unwarp it real quick. And if I just take this, I'll show you. We can kind of... Cool. So then, if we look at the grid here, you can kind of see where it's fitting in. I can make this smaller. But if we start pitching this up, you can see that it'll make this cool kind of percussive sound. So yeah, just anything like that. Just going through old breaks and taking sounds and chopping them and pitching them up is a really good way to get this sound. I know this is a technique that Fortet uses, and I'm pretty sure Jon Hopkins does it as well. And I mean, a ton of other people that make this style of music do this. It's really a great way to add some cool percussion to your tracks. If I turn these 2 layers off, you can hear this doesn't have nearly the type of texture and organic vibe. This is really what gives it that feel. So this is an important step. So yeah, then after those, I just have these 2 background noise layers. They're just adding, some extra kind of texture and again, I guess more of the organic kind of feel here. So here's the first one. You can hear it. It's got that kind of just background noise, but then it's also got these cool clicks in there. I thought those were cool. They had an interesting texture to them. They definitely sounded kind of interesting in the beat because they're not perfectly on the grid. When you look at this, you can see it's kind of off the grid, but they just kind of come in at different parts. And it adds some randomness. A big part of the organic feel is randomness because, when you're playing an instrument or when, for example, you're making background noise, or recording background noise, it's never going to be exactly the same twice. So you don't want your tracks to be exactly the same twice. And obviously, with electronic music, that's not necessarily always the case. But with this kind of thing, background noise and little, incidental percussion and stuff, it's important to have things that mix it up. So these little clicks in the background really do that well with this one. And then the next one that I have is just this. It's just a cool kind of vinyl noise. I'll turn it up. So yeah, again, it's just adding some background sound. So that's really it for this one, guys. Like I said, the main things to think about are just sort of setting up like the main drums and getting sounds that work without processing, because it's much better to have a sound that sounds good with no effects than something that only sounds good when you put a lot of effects on it. And then like the stuff with the vinyl percussion and then the background noise. So that's gonna be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Once again, you can get the project file and samples from this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, go there and check them out there. Follow all my social media. It's on the screen now. And thank you again, everybody. I will see you tomorrow with another tutorial.